So again, good day everyone. I'm Jen Cruz Amado and today's vlog I'm going to share my insights about learning to know. So the teacher's fundamental task is to get students to engage in learning activities that are likely to result in achieving the intended learning outcomes. And this is very helpful to remember that what students does is actually more important than what the teacher does. And every learning activity, your unit should be intentional, meaningful, and successful. As you noted in the session outcomes page, each learning activity in unit should be aligned to the unit, as well as the more specific learning outcomes should each session of module that you teach the intent of the activity then clear to both of you and your students. So it is equally important that each activity is meaningful and ensures student development and advancement through the unit. Activities should be built on previous activities and avoid being repetitive. They should enable students to engage with and develop their skills, knowledge, and understanding in different ways. And meaningful activities engage subject in active, constructive, meaningful activities and intentional, authentic, and in cooperative ways. Okay, so let's proceed to useful. Okay, useful learning activities are ones where the student is able to take what they have learned from the engaging with activity and use it into another context or for another purpose. For example, students are able to directly apply the skills or knowledge they acquired and an assessment task or the next activity in your unit. So the activity types provided below are by no means exhaustive list, but will help you in thinking through how the best design and deliver high impact learning experience for your students in your unit. So the content focus and the students interaction. Whether the learning outcomes for a session or module include declarative or functioning knowledge, almost all of them will be supported in some way by the presentation of information to students. Activities which involve the students' interaction with the content can include listening and watching a live or recorded talk, engaging with a written or visual context, engaging with multimedia or combination of this. The typical student are more likely to retain information and presented in this ways of if they are asked to interact with materials in some way. Why is it useful to ask for invite questions or include another activity type after every 5 or 15 minutes chunk of information. So like for example, the live lectorial online in the campus and provide information orally supported by slides in 1 to 7 minutes to blocks interspersed with interactions such as asking students to respond to a related question. For example, ask the students a question that requires them to apply summaries, explain and or identify etc. important aspects of the information just presented. So after making the question, so we'll just wait until 4 to 5 seconds before asking for volunteers or calling on a randomly selected students to respond. So it may be useful to provide a visual clue for students, identifying that after posing the question, you would like them to consider to respond and remain silent for the designated amount of time. So after the student has to respond to the question, call another student to summarize the first study response and alternatively, if the first response was not completely accurate, and invite the second student to respond the first student's answer. the name, and what you think about that. So this activity, okay, so this is alternatively students might work through problems, case students, calculations, etc., and individually or in small groups of following short sections of content delivery. The activity would be particularly relevant for supporting student progress and towards learning outcomes with declarative knowledge. Okay, so for example, the assigned reading provide students with access to text, journal, article, a vlog, and multimedia presentation, accompanied the text with a number of questions, which will help the students to focus and engage with the text. The question could be provide for a personal reflection, and they could be addressed further in the subsequent synchronous session, online or on campus. So they could be presented in the form of online quiz and weighted or unweighted or survey, or they can be required as part of the synchronous activity or online, among other options and possibilities. The questions posed and how the students are asked to respond, and they will be dependent on how the student requires to do. For example, the unit of the students requires to do with identify might be questions and the highlight of the relevance aspects, which require the students to identify the key ideas in reading for a unit with evaluation. However, the question might ask student to list advantage and disadvantage to compare and contrast different approaches noted in the text.
Yeah.